Guys, welcome back to the HawksZone Rundown. We are going live again here. Guys, get your comments and questions in the comments section because Bryce, less than 24 hours, Seahawks made a move, Ryan Grubb out. So, not wasting any time. But joining us on the show today to help us break all this down and also some predictions that we think, and Brandon Cain from the Hawks Nest podcast thinks is going to happen here in the next few months. Brandon Cain is joining us today, so we're excited about that, and we're going to break all that down for you guys. And just before we do that, guys, if you haven't done it yet, go down, hit the sub button for us, hit the like button, share the videos. It all helps out, and everyone has been doing it. We appreciate the support. We just recently hit the 1K mark, so you know what, big things are coming here in 2025 for the channel as well. So Brandon Cain on the other side.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. And it's run. Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schreiner with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got away. Leon Wilson with a catch. Smith and Jigba. The Seahawks are going to host the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does. Is it going to be another 9 and 8?
Mike Macdonald got to finish something in
Seattle.
They have to fix the offensive
part of his
line.
success and part of
Ambition of being the LOB
Want to hear? That's trading DK Metcalf.
Play him aggressive.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Brandon Cain joins us tonight on the HawksZone Rundown to talk about some big news, maybe not surprising to a lot of people, but less than 24 hours, the Seahawks have made a move and fired Ryan Grubb, their OC. Brandon, how's it going?
doing good. Like you said, it's not super shocking, but doing well and feeling good about the team overall, which is, of course, the most important part of this as we head in this offseason, despite not maybe getting to the playoffs, still feeling good about where we're heading here.
Yes, well, we appreciate you joining us here to break this all down. We'll kick it right off, man. What's your initial thoughts about the firing Ryan Grubb today?
Well, it's one where I think there's a lot of the sentiment out there from some Hawk fans that you need to give this guy a little bit more time. The offensive line was in such disarray that it's unfair in some ways to let him go. I think from my perspective, I wasn't hard-lined on either way of this, but I did find myself leaning to believe that there was certain things that I might term fatal flaw, Achilles heel, things that were standing out in the way that he was calling games and going about his business, that it wasn't all bad. It wasn't he's trash. You know, we live in the age of everything's got to be extreme, but that you were worried that, okay, we get these things down the line fixed up like the offensive line, and still you're going to have issues, maybe pre-snap penalties. Well, still, you know, you're going to have an issue with a lack of commitment to the running game. Well, still, you're going to kind of have some squirrely play calls like 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, constantly throwing the ball and long developing routes. And, you know, putting your quarterback into weird positions when there's down in the shadow of his own end zone, like having him roll to his left, sprint option on a right-handed quarterback, which is about as dumb as it comes to me. So it's things like that where you go, well, you're so smart in certain ways, but other ways it's just not there. And that much stuff, I don't know if it was going to come along. And I think Mike Macdonald kind of showed you he didn't think it was going to come along.
Yeah, when I heard the news, Brandon, and, you know, we went on our live show last night to react to the Rams game and all that, I kind of figured that Ryan Grubb was done. And I thought for probably since the bye week, I figured Ryan Grubb was on his way out of Seattle. And it's not because I don't think Ryan Grubb is a good football coach. I think he's a good offensive coordinator. I think the reason he's not the Seahawks offensive coordinator anymore truly is alignment and shared vision with Mike Macdonald on what Mike Macdonald wants his offense to look like to complement the defense they have in Seattle. And that's where I think you just kind of, you know, you listen to Mike today on his show. He talked about it. He said it was, you know, the time to do it. There was an alignment and a, you know, shared vision issue, basically. And I'm paraphrasing. I would suggest highly everyone go watch the show if you want to get the exact quote from it. But the thing for me is the questionable play calling, like you alluded to already, and the fact that I think Ryan Grubb and the way he's come up, he comes up from being on an offensive staff where the majority of your staff, your head coach and everything, are offensive-minded individuals. And he alluded to at a point, too, in one of his press conferences, it was kind of a different thing for him to have, Mike and Leslie have an idea of how they want things done, even at practice, and where he wants 20 or 30 more offensive plays. And if he was with Kalen DeBoer, he'd get those. No problem, no questions asked. But he wasn't getting those here in Seattle because of the fact that Mike Macdonald and Leslie Frazier and the defense, they had a certain structure. And it's because of how Mike's wired and where Mike comes from. Overall, I think it's the right decision for the Hawks. I don't think it's a scapegoat situation. I don't think Mike Macdonald has any issues on performance in some respects with what Ryan Grubb did. I think it's more of a, you don't align with how I see the game being played the way I want my team to play. And that's just I think the real root of this firing is just a misalignment on their philosophies.
I think that's probably a pretty accurate way of looking at it. I think you come back to the hiring of him, and the thing that stands out is that you had to wait on Mike Macdonald through the hiring process. That meant a lot of OCs were taken off the board. Guys that would have maybe more been grade A guys Mike Macdonald would have wanted. We know, I think almost with certainty, that Arthur Smith, the former Atlanta head coach, would have been the OC here if you had been able to get Macdonald earlier. There's an early Baltimore Ravens exit right now. Smith's probably our OC. And I think that that's an indicator there when you look at the type of OC that Arthur Smith is. And it's not a pass happy spread concept guy. And so I think that that does blend back to defense and how you usually want to build this. I think it's also kind of smart on this. I know fans like pass happy natures of things, but something that stood out to me here recently when looking at this team and where we play, and I think you can attest to this, and I think you said you coach and you're out in these elements, and that is that there is a very big difference between you have September and sunshine and 70 degrees in the Pacific Northwest outdoors versus once we get into early November and that wind is a blowing and that rain is a falling and that cold little chill sets in and it does something kind of funky to the football and playing the game offensively speaking. And where I derive my mindset on that then is going back to a bit of the old school conceptual stuff of, okay, pass happy stuff goes a little bit out the door. We got to put on our hard hat and get to running, boys.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with both you guys, and I think it could be a combo of both because, if you had a more successful pass happy game and you're spreading it out and it's a JSN and DK show every single week and we're putting up points, I think it'd be a little harder decision. I think I agree. It doesn't align with what Mike wants to do. He wants a run heavy offense, which he alluded to even early on. I think it was before the first San Francisco game. And then it became so obvious that they had a conversation at some point in the week. And then he's like, run, pass. And then he was just like, it just wasn't in Grubb's nature to do that. So, continues to do what he does. But, just telltale signs throughout the year too, when who were we playing when we had 10 plays on the 1 yard line and we couldn't punch it in and it was all over the map. It's like the first play was a fade to DK, which never works, right? And then, running up the middle with our heavy package, which never works. So it was stuff that he kept trying to do that just never worked. Unleashing DK the first part of the season, and then he says, well, now I got to unleash JSM, but now I forget all about DK Metcalf, putting up 6 points against the Chicago Bears in a must-win game. It's so to me, it's that combination where it just with not aligning with Mike and some of the performance that you saw throughout where you were just scratching your head, I think it was an obvious firing. And the only thing I was worried about, and we talked about that, I think it would have been a little different because you see how Mike, like early in the year, 2 linebackers out the door, wasn't fitting his system. Go get me 2 new guys or, promote one and bring me a whole new guy in Ernest Jones. So it'd be interesting if Pete was around, how that would work out. It seems like we're not messing around. We're doing it right now. I know what I want. You're out the door. And so I sort of see it as it was an easier decision because of also some of the stuff that was happening on the field. And just really, when you look at it, no identity either.
No, I think, about your goal line, take that. That's a bit back to that stuff will work, but then he goes back to so much stuff that doesn't work and he sort of forgets the stuff that does work. Sundell is a fullback in the backfield, goal line, heavy formation. Okay, so inside linebackers pre-snap read does that is what? You're going where they're going to run this ball. That it's an offensive lineman and there's a fullback. I'm going where that fullback's going. So the first time they run it, fullback goes right. You're running it off left, off tackle. And you see the linebacker. It's just an ease step to the side. Just a slidey step to the side, opens it up on that back hole, and you're able to bang it in there with Charbonnet. Does he go back to that again throughout the year? Did you go back that one? Or every time you had Sundell in there, did you have it go behind him where you're running the power right behind Sundell so that their pre-snap indicators where they're going is right? And isn't that what we saw a lot in the run game, was that these guys pre-snap were getting to where the play was going to go. They knew where it was going to go. And that's what I don't understand. It worked for you before. Why did you run away from it?
Yeah.
The fly sweep to Charbonnet in the Jets game at the goal line. Did you ever see that again throughout the year? It worked. You pounded in, tough goal line issues, go back to it. That would be the thing as head coach to me, where I'd be looking at him going, that's going to get stuck in my craw.
Yeah, and there were things with Grubb's, even some of his, play action concept, which we were extremely low at as a team, which is surprising considering Geno is a good play action quarterback, statistically speaking. But even in this Rams game, they knew when we were going to do a play action because we're faking to a side that we never run the ball to. Mm-hmm. And there were times where Geno took his sack on the first drive that, I don't know if it was Verse or one of their other ends, basically shot the hole, and Charbonnet couldn't even get a block on the play action because the guy knew it was a pass and he went blitzing right through. And it's when teams can tee off, and like you're saying, their indicators are right. The offense is playing behind the 8 ball the entire day. And this is why I think we never saw an opening touchdown drive. That's a really damning thing when you have 17 games and you don't have one opening touchdown drive all year. And 2, why you never really saw us continually throughout a game control it on offense. We constantly would have moments and spurts where we were in control, we were moving the ball, things were going well. And like you said, you have things that are working and you don't go back to them. You completely deviate from it and go off in left field because you think it's going to open up something else. No, stay with what is working. And once they figure out a way to handle it, then have your counter off of what, okay, they finally are biting on this. Now we can do this. And I never saw that progression from Grubb. And I think, that's part of what maybe, the alignment issue was with Mike Macdonald. I don't think Mike Macdonald wants to come in here and go back to 1970 power football. I don't think that's his envisionment.
No.
I think he wants to. Sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
No, and I'm sorry to interrupt you on it, because I want to make sure we're clear on this too. I got it, and because I think this is kind of a deep dive on this. If you look at it, Bryce, going back, you remember Holmgren's offenses?
Yes.
Do you remember some of the issues that existed with the wide receiver core for about a 3 or 4 year stretch in there?
Yes.
Why do you think those issues with, I think, the drops, why did they show up for a receiver core that was very talented at that time? A lot of draft pick compensation put into that receiving core, tight ends, but throughout they all had issues with it. Why? Why this year do we have 3 of maybe the top 25 guys in drops this year as well? Why is it a commonality when you're in the stadium? I'm trying to lead you a certain place on this, of course.
I know where you're leading.
Okay. Give me your thoughts on it.
So there's a couple thoughts I have on it. When I've had teams myself, when I've coached and we've had drops with receivers, usually there's a couple factors. They're dealing with a lot of contested opportunities because teams know you're throwing the ball and you're throwing it at a very high rate. You're not setting them up for success where, like, when you run play action outside of faking linebackers and that defense into biting into a run, you hesitate DBs because they're not sure where their responsibility lies. Are they coming in to help with run support or are they backing off? Mm-hmm. Your windows get smaller when you pass more without a balanced attack because, again, like you said, teams indicators, they know you're going to drop back and pass. But the flip side of that, if you go run heavy, they're not getting as many opportunities to catch, and therefore they're not getting as much run as a receiving core to have the opportunity to catch the ball. They are in and out of the game. And I think one thing we can talk about to that point was years ago with DK, when you weren't getting him involved early in a game because we were running, because we were doing other things, you weren't seeing DK was having a lot of drop issues. And we've talked about that before on different points, but I think that's where you might be going. At least that's my perception, Brandon.
It's in general terms. When you ran the West Coast concepts with Mike Holmgren, those are built, of course, on early throwing the down early, but it's balanced as an offense. So it's not a high volume passing attack. It's balanced. The issue that you have, and you spoke about one side of it, it's actually 2 sides of it to me, which is that when you have to operate off the shorter routes and you're going to work that more and more, that means that there's going to be less of that separation, more contested catch type of situations, number one. Number 2, the quarterback has to then throw with more velocity on those shorter throws because of the tight windows. You put it in with a layered throw on a slant route, that corner is undercutting that throw. Yeah. And so that then leads to, when you have wet conditions, windy conditions where it gets hard to put a ball in an exact place, that's where you now run into a little bit of a roadblock in that where you're not able to make that offense go the way it should. You can have the talent, you can have the quarterback, you can have the mastermind of an offensive guy in Mike Holmgren to get it done. And it's still a good offense and worked well when you were outside of those elements. But when you put him in those exact elements in this stadium with the three of those things going together, in my opinion, and watching it through time and offenses that try to go with just a little too much passing, I'm not advocating for 70s football here. But what I am saying is that there is a drive right now to go more pass happy. And I think with this outlook going forward, it's got to be a little bit more of, rather than leaning into how can we become this explosive passing offense, got to maybe be a little bit more into just finding a little more pure balance because of the nature of the stadium we played in. If it was the Kingdome days, I'd feel different on this, but I really do feel like it's hard to execute. If you're going to be pass happy, you're probably working off shorter passing attack more often than not. It's not going to be you living in 7-step drops and having the quarterback like we have with Geno this year, and we tried it this year, where he's just going to look, down the field for your pass protection is not going to hold on long enough. And so I worry about those coming together as those elements. Do you think I'm kind of on that, or am I out on this a little bit?
No, I actually think you've got a lot of valid points with that, Brandon, because the one thing for me, like when I coach, and I am an offensive coordinator, I've coached at the collegiate level, and I'm now coaching down below now, you have to have an ability to control what you can control. And when you're dealing with the elements like you're talking about, the wind, the wet, and all that later in the months, you need to be able to turn and go, hey, we can go under center and we can run the ball and we can do, spider wide to banana really well in our offense. And it's a staple for us because it's, allows us to be able to control the game. And when I look at Seattle, and this is the one thing I've kind of looked at over these offenses that are successful this year, and we're talking about Detroit and the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell and these offenses we see, and yes, they play in domes, but the one thing a lot of them do well is they vary their formations, but they're balanced. You can see them turn the game over to Jamar Gibbs and Montgomery. You can see them turn it over in Minnesota sometimes to Aaron Jones and Cam Akers in that running game and alleviate some of the pressure off of Goff and Darnold. But then their play action game, because they have this vary of formations, they're able to do things that look so simple, but they're huge and explosive. Like how often have we seen guys off the McVay tree, Kevin O'Connell, Zach Taylor, and I can go on with the list, Mike LaFleur, they run the fake zone stretch one way and boot back and hit Cooper Kupp or whoever in the flat for like what looks to be like a 3-yard pass, but there's no one around him. So he turns it into a 20-yard gain. And it's such a simple play, but it's built off of the whole concept of being balanced and having, the ability to run the ball and stick with it. If we run the ball in a game and we're getting 4 yards a carry and then we go away from it, it makes no sense to me because in 2 plays, you're 3rd and 2. You can do different things at that point. And that was where I just got so frustrated at points. Like I see us come up, and it was very much when we had Jeremy Bates. And I know you remember when we had Jeremy Bates here in Seattle with Pete Carroll, and we had it's 3rd and 1. Let's throw the fade ball. It's 3rd and 1. Let's throw the fade ball. And it's like, no, let's run the ball and get the first down. And then we can, progress this offense. I just never saw it. And for people in the chat that are saying, Mike Macdonald scapegoated Ryan Grubb and he should have had another year. This wasn't, and we've talked about it a little bit, but this wasn't Ryan Grubb is a bad offensive coordinator. Ryan Grubb is horrible at his job. This was me and Ryan Grubb do not see offense the same way.
Well, I mean, but is it more than that? Because when I brought my point earlier, I think it's a combination. He's a first-time play caller in the NFL. He was good in college, but this is his first crack in the NFL. And if you sat here, take away Mike Macdonald, he's not the head coach, and you just had Ryan Grubb, I don't care whoever the head coach is, even if they align, would you have been satisfied with what he put out there? And that's what you got to ask yourself. It's not. Because I think it is a combination of it. I don't think they align at all. I agree with all that, but I maybe Mike doesn't think he's that good for the NFL, and that's the reason he didn't want to give him even a second chance with the combination of alignment. But I mean, I don't know, like our teams. He's going back to college, but I just look at it like if I just took away the head coach and said, I'm watching the games like we all have, and scratched our head almost every game. To me, that wasn't an alignment thing. That was like, what are you doing? The stuff we've talked about. So to me, I think it's more than that. I agree with the firing. I think it should be done because why would you run that back? Even if you aligned, I didn't think he did a good job.
I think it's all those things, Bryce, too. I think it's, to Ryan's point, I think that's a bit of this here that I wonder, like those things I talked about fatal flaw wise, I wonder if that's just a bit of a scratch in the back of Mike Macdonald's skull a little bit when thinking about this situation of it's not mutually exclusive, right? Where, okay, we can get the offensive line will improve and Grubb will improve with that, but then these other things that do exist there still remain. And I do wonder if it's kind of all of that made this such kind of, especially with them thinking about this around the bye week, like we kind of heard whispers has maybe been the case.
Yeah, so that's definitely an interesting fact. Obviously we're talking about a little bit with Ian Furness here and how they said that they almost made this move at the bye week and basically kept and hung off of it. And I think that's why we saw this happen so quickly. Like, we're not even talking 24 hours after the game, Ryan Grubb was let go. Like, I think it was basically like, hey, you're going to play this out, and then it's done, and we're moving on. And Greg Bell reported as well that this was a Mike Macdonald move, not a John Schneider decision, which is a good thing. And I think at this point he got, obviously John Schneider supporting it. But the thing for me that's interesting is John Schneider made the statement when, Pete was fired, hey, I'm looking after the staff now, like the coaching staff's under me. I like the fact this is a Mike Macdonald decision and not John Schneider forcing Mike Macdonald into something. But with that being said, let's take a look at some of the potential offensive coordinator candidates. So I'm going to put this up on the screen so everyone can see it. These are just a list of guys I've come up with that I think have potential in Seattle. And then we'll just kind of go through them one by one. So this is our list that I've kind of worked through. So we've got Jake Peetz up at the top, obviously in-house passing game coordinator for the Seahawks. I think he's probably the front runner. I've thought that for a while. Doug Peterson, the former head coach of the Jaguars. I've heard he may retire, is what I've heard, is he may step back from coaching. Wes Phillips, who's the OC with the Vikings, doesn't call plays there. Tanner Engstrand, who's the passing game coordinator for Lions and, was involved in Seattle's OC search last year. Josh McCown's a very popular choice right now with the success of Sam Darnold, and he's the QB coach of the Vikings. Mike Kafka, who is, a OC for the Giants, and we had multiple interviews last year for head coach and OC, but got blocked because they were going to give him play calling duties. Now, this is where the list gets kind of interesting with three guys here that have connections, or two of them at least have connections to the Harbaugh tree. So you got Marcus Brady, who's the passing game coordinator with the Chargers. He's been an NFL OC before with the Colts. He was hired by Jim Harbaugh there in LA right now. He does have a track record of being an OC in multiple. He was an OC in the CFL. He's been an OC in the NFL. He's run some pretty good offenses. So he's definitely an interesting one. Mark Brunell's one on here with everyone talking about Josh McCown and, how he's the QB whisperer. Mark Brunell's been the quarterback coach for the last 3 years in Detroit with, Jared Goff and helping him kind of resurrect himself there after he was cast off from the Rams. We talk about guys that have an understanding that, know the NFL. Mark Brunell is a pretty successful NFL quarterback. He has ties to the Pacific Northwest. He went to UW. He could be someone you might be able to get in as an OC. T. Martin is the QB coach of the Ravens. He was also the receiver coach at the same time Mike Macdonald was there. Mike LaFleur, we saw the OC for the Rams. Again, he doesn't call plays there. Jason Vrabel, who is the pass game coordinator for the Packers and has been getting a bit of buzz. And then obviously the last one I threw in here because some people have brought it up is Brian Schottenheimer, who I think as of next week has an expiring contract with the Cowboys and will be a free agent. So yeah, this is kind of the list of guys I've compiled today, just some different things, reaching out to different people and hearing different names. Anyone on this list, Brandon, for you that outside of Jake Peetz really, you'd be interested in? Say three guys you'd want to see bring in for interviews?
I gotta say, not particularly. I think, we'll see with Kafka if he goes, because we don't know yet if Dable's going to move on. I know the team liked Kafka last year a lot in looking for the coach. They had him in a couple times, I think, or a time or two. I think Josh McCown is going to be one of those kind of weird guys, like a Campbell type guy who nobody thinks is going to get a head coach job in an off season, but just suddenly gets it, where everyone's thinking like OC, and he just kind of makes a weird jump. That again is just a feeling I'm getting with him a little bit on that. But he's also, the issue I have on a lot of this list when you break it down is the fact that last two offensive coordinators we've tried to try out guys who've never called plays before, and that hasn't worked. And I don't think we want to go back down that same road once again. I know Brian Schottenheimer's called plays. There might be a guy or two here who's got a little bit of familiarity in doing that stuff, but Not Ingstrad, for instance. We know that. You mentioned LaFleur at the Rams. We know that. And so I would like to get a guy with a little bit more, if we're looking outside, and at least with Pete, he's got the familiarity inside, and he's just as good as any of these candidates to my money. I'd like to get more of the bright, shining, hey, this guy's had success in the NFL. It's called games in the NFL. It's less than a specific guy at that point and more a guy that checks those boxes rather than going for the untested. You're not sure what you're going to get because it just hasn't worked with those last two guys we brought in here.
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, because I was talking to Bryce about this off air because, obviously Pete's is in our system right now, but hasn't called plays. Is that something? Because that's what I was thinking as far as like, even though he's got a lot of NFL experience, do you want to go down that road, or do you want to bring in even some guy who's just has the experience of calling plays? I'm not be a superstar, but it's just like he's called plays. He aligns with, sort of my vision. And because I went through this with Grubb, not to that level because he has been in the NFL. But what are your thoughts on that?
I would just about go as far to this, and I'm probably a little extreme, as like a guy that I know there'd be a lot of bristleback on this one, but even a guy like a John Gruden type would be so much better to me as the candidate than some of these guys we're looking at. And if these just feel to me like bridgey. Yeah. It doesn't feel like this is the guy. And look, nobody knew Ben Johnson was going to be the guy to go the next step till he became that guy. So it's just, I feel like we have gone down the untested, unproven track record as a little bit. I think there's going to be less of a need of this offensive coordinator being some next level guy with the defense we're putting into place. Right. So that's a little bit of this, but I would like to go more into not Gruden, maybe necessarily, but look for more of those kind of guys. I think you're right, Bryce, about Doug Peterson. I think the indications are he's going to retire when he does get let go. And so that's really that's not really even a viable one there. That's why I haven't talked about him a little bit on this. I just don't think he's going to be in play. But we'll see if somebody does else emerge here that might be a head coach right now that's let go, even though Black Monday tends to be the day. Sometimes this can take a little bit more time and see if somebody comes up. But I'd like a little bit of, maybe outside the box. And if outside the box doesn't exist, to find that tried and true, then you go back to the Pete's guy, because it's like I said, they're all kind of on that same mishmash of, well, he's got some upside to him. One guy you didn't have on the list that might be another guy worth looking at too is Clint Kubiak. The Saints guy is also one guy I might, take. But again, Ryan, Bress, these guys are all it's half a dozen, 1-6 another kind of situation when it comes to not they're bad and there's the upside there, but it's all a roll of the dice on all those guys versus you bring a guy in who's done this before, knows how to put his staff together, knows what the alignment issue, which I think is that was a valid point, Bryce, by the way, is I think the lack of alignment, it's that a lack of alignment and that fatal flaw, I think. And when you put that all together a bit with what you were dealing with on him, but that would be more where I'd go. Where do you guys stand on it?
Ryan, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I don't have a candidate in mind particularly, but I agree with what you're saying as far as you're sort of in that middle of the row. And then Pete's, I think not that, he comes from the McVay tree and so many guys have excelled. And but again, he'd be the first time play caller. So would you want to do that back to back? Like, Grubb's called plays, but not at the NFL level. So it's kind of like you're trying to get in Mike Macdonald's head, right? Because if you look at, because I do agree, like the alignment wasn't there, but also he's sitting there like, man, what is this guy doing? How many times is he kind of hinted like we need to run the ball more, and then just, if we're scratching our head every week, I can't believe, I can't even imagine what he's doing, right? So, but I wouldn't be, I'd be fine with Pete. I think it'd take a shot. Mike's showing that he's not afraid to go one and done. But man, it was just really bad offensively this year, just as a whole, zero identity. We talked about Shane Waldron and how a lot of times they didn't have an identity. And then there's times during the season where we're reminiscing about Shane Waldron and how it's like, hey, actually maybe it wasn't that bad. Like, remember the 3 tight end sets and, all this kind of stuff. And so that's just how bad it was this year for me. And I think for a lot of people, and I think that's just why he was gone in less than 24 hours. So I just think, you know what? I'm just trying to process it, right? I think the whole time was just like, hey, are they going to make this move and fire Grubb? That was the thing. I was, because I think we talked about like it's going to happen, but then you're not sure. And I really felt like if it didn't happen on Black Monday, I probably would have got worried, because I felt like this was going to be a move that was going to be done either right away or maybe not at all. So yeah, it's kind of where I'm looking at it.
So it's interesting for me because when I look at what the staff that Mike Macdonald constructed or sort of constructed, because we know John Schneider had a play in it because Mike got hired so late. He did take, it wasn't necessarily that he needs somebody to be the head coach of the offensive side like he is on the defensive side, but he wants someone that aligns with his vision, that doesn't have the fatal flaws like Brandon talked to. I think the biggest fatal flaw in this for Grubb was NFL experience and how the NFL game is truly actually played and constructed. And that was one thing he said this week, which I thought was really damning for Ryan Grubb in his press conference was, they put him up there and a lot of people thought, because they put Ryan Grubb up this week that he wasn't going to get fired. And I was like, that has nothing to do with it. We've seen that happen before. But when he came out, and I think it was Michael Sean Dugard, could be wrong, someone asked him the question of, what have you learned this year? What have you learned? Where have you grown? And he kind of not scoffed at it, but kind of was like, well, I haven't really learned or grown, but, I'm starting to understand now that you got to attack structure and scheme and not personnel. And I went and I kind of took that and I went and I replayed it because I thought I misheard the comment, and I replayed it and I heard it again. And I was like, wow, like that is such a damning thing for an NFL coach to say. I didn't understand that you needed to attack the scheme or the structure of a defense and I was just basically attacking the personnel. And you can do that in college. You can, and you can be very successful doing that in college because there's such an overturn of players. You have such a gap in player talent from guys coming right out of high school to guys that are 3 or 4 years into it. But when you get to the NFL, Josh Jobe, for example, 3rd or 4th string corner on the Seahawks, he started at Alabama. Your talent level and your personnel gap, you can't just attack. You can attack it to an extent, but you need to be attacking structure and scheme of a defense. And so when he started talking about that in previous press conference, he mentioned about like understanding family trees in the NFL and stuff like that. That's where I started to become really concerned with, okay, this guy is over his head when it comes to understanding how the NFL works and how you attack it. That's where I look at guys, we looked at that list, and I totally understand where you're coming from, Brandon, where you're like, you want someone that has that knowledge, how to put it together and how to get it going in the right direction. I just don't know if there's that person out there right now because Frank Reich's not coming back. Doug Peterson, we've talked about. Maybe someone gets fired that we're not anticipating and you have that opportunity. But if you're going to go with the unknown, go with some guys that have NFL experience. Maybe not calling plays, but at least have been around enough, seen enough, understand how it works. Like Jake Peets, for example, which I think is going to be the guy. I think they're going to do a search, but they're going to circle back to him. He's been in the NFL for 15 years. He's got extensive work through McVay's tree, Shanahan. He's gone to, Oakland. He did call plays at LSU with Ed Orgeron down there. Orgeron got fired, and I think that's why he ended up reverting back to the NFL after that. He's been around a lot of different philosophies, a lot of systems. You can say that for Josh McCown and Mark Brunell. They played in the NFL. They've been around it. I want someone that understands how it works in the NFL. And because I don't think we're going to get that experienced play caller unless someone gets fired that we're not anticipating, I think there's a good chance it's going to be Jake Peets out of that list. Now, if it wasn't Jake Peets, I'm very interested in Mark Brunell. To bring in someone that's helped Jared Goff, we're talking about the fact that we do need to find our next quarterback for the future. It can't be Geno for the next 7 years. I would like to have someone on the staff maybe that has some ability to work with a quarterback, help develop a young quarterback. And that's where Mark Brunell for me is an interesting candidate, if he even at all gets interviewed. But he's someone that definitely interests me. I think it's going to be Jake Peets because I think Mike Macdonald also has a lot of respect for Sean McVay and his tree. I don't think he's scared off because of one bad apple and Shane Waldron, because there have been a lot of successful ones coming out of Sean's tree.
Yeah, you can see where Waldron went wrong too, where he's not running the Rams offense. So I confirm this talking to AJ Snyder, bootleg football, with his bear love and, watching in person. So, you're different set eyeballs. You seeing the thing I'm seeing where it's pre-snap motions not in there. You're not getting any of the fly sweep game, not challenging you really laterally as much as just getting downhill too much passing. So I don't think Waldron was a little bit of an outlier, to your point. And I'm okay with that too as well. I think that's a fair and realistic outlook on the situation where there may not just be that grade A wonderful candidate you can bring in to get it done. And you got to kind of get by with maybe taking a risk or a guy that is untested. And you're not going to have the problems you had before where you have somebody that's not in alignment where, run the ball. He'll know to run the ball. These are all balanced attacks. We're not going air raid again. right? That's not going to be the candidate we bring in is going to be probably a spread conceptual guy, I would estimate on that side of it. So it's, to me, I'm okay going that direction if they have to, and it's understandable. And the thing with being the OC, and that you can move these things in and out. People like to get a little bit hardened up. It's more the coaches you don't move on from. That's what you let sort of set and develop. But Campbell in his first year let go of his OC midway through the year. He didn't even wait till the end of the year. He let him, and so this, had some success doing this pivot. So it's not the worst way to go on this. It's not a scapegoat thing. It's just, this is the best direction here for the future of the football team. And I think it's when we all three of us on this can not only understand, but probably approve of in the grand scheme of things, is the best move.
Yeah, and that's what we criticize Pete a lot for too. Maybe being too loyal to either players on his team or guys on his staff, right? Like some of the in-house promotions and then guys that you were like, man, these guys just shouldn't be in the positions they're in. Mike's showing us that he's not hesitating, which you like. I mean, I like that trait where it's like, listen, this is the NFL. It's not always about friendships here. It's about, I need to get a job done. And if it's not working, I'm not afraid to move on. So, I mean, that to me, that's encouraging because he wants to get things right. And he's not going to wait another year and say, okay, you know what? This guy came from college. He's got to adapt another year, maybe give him a little better offensive line. Cause I didn't look at that because people will talk about that. There is that section of fans that say, well, you can't run the ball because you're, the low hanging fruit that we always hear about the offensive line. And I just didn't buy it because there was times when Bryce threw out some numbers earlier about what we were getting per carry a lot of games, and it just disappeared. So just with all that stuff above, it's just, he knows what he wants and he knows the direction. So yeah, I go either way. Pete's sure, but I also wouldn't surprise me if he just got a guy in here that's like, knows he knows what he's going to get from a play caller. And then, like you said, they're building this defense up, and I think that's he just wants to have a dominant defense. And then, hey, if you have an average offense that runs the ball and stays on the field a lot longer, then maybe that's all you need. And we'll see what happens with that.
We were talking a little bit about this real quick too, and just doubling back to this point on that, Ryan and Bryce, what you were saying a little bit. This is where I'm starting to get to as far as evolution of the sport goes, with the cycles that it goes into.
Yeah.
And where the cycle feels like with me right now, as we've watched the last couple of years of defense taking a little bit of the ground back for the first time in like 15, 20 years, taking a little bit back. We're seeing more rushers now eclipse the 1,000-yard mark. I'm looking around the league at guys that are even highly paid quarterbacks throughout the league making $200 million and seeing teams lean them into the best zone for those guys being around 30 pass attempts a game. Like a Kyler Murray. Where's Kyler at his best? 30 passing attempts using his legs or 40 passing attempps? And isn't that trouble town for him? Isn't that where you start to get the interceptions popping up now? And I know it's just a 10 attempt difference, but 27 to 43, and staying more in that track. That seems to be where we're at in the money spot right now in the game. It might change another couple years down the road and get more back into the pass happy stretch, but feels that way right now with the cover 2 proliferation and all of that.
That's a good point.
And I think that's why you're seeing a lot more 12 personnel come back with the teams that are being successful right now. Detroit, Minnesota, a lot of these teams have gone back to the 12 personnel. And the reason for that is because you're in this too high shell, we can run the ball. Your box isn't as heavy, and it's this back and forth that offense and defense constantly play with each other every 10 years. Hey, we go to the RPO, and Russ and RG3 are leading this RPO revolution. All of a sudden, the defensive ends get faster and quicker, and you play things differently, and that gets taken away, except if you're Lamar Jackson, basically, is about the exception to the rule. And then you go to this too high show because, everyone's bombing away because, everyone's playing a lot of single high based off Pete's cover 3 scheme that he ran for years. Mahomes comes in the league. Hey, we bomb it away down the middle of the field. We're going to have some success on these guys down the seams and everything. Now we're going to go to too high and take that away. Now teams are going back to the run game. But this is one thing that was interesting. And Bob Condotta posted this a couple hours ago. And he goes, this is from Mike Macdonald's first press conference and kind of a clip of it. He goes, Mike Macdonald, the percentage of when you run the ball and how much, that's all adjustable. To me, it's going to mirror our football team. We're going to be a physical football team. We're going to have answers. We're going to try to be explosive and really build around the players that we have. We're going through a process right now of who's going to be helping design that and ultimately calling plays. To have a specific answer for you, what it's going to look like, I can't do that now, but that'll come in focus soon here rather than later. The two things that I take out of that is we're going to be a physical football team and we're going to have answers. I didn't look at the Seahawks offense this year and think a physical team. And I didn't think we had a lot of answers. Yes, JSN had 1,000 yards, which is great. We unlocked JSN and he had a great season. But in doing so, we lost a lot of other components to that. DK all of a sudden kind of fell off a cliff. And a lot of people are going to say, DK is not worth this. DK is not very good. I believe DK is not a top 5 NFL receiver. I'm totally in alignment with that. But I think there were some answer issues that we had where it was like all of a sudden we got super hyper focused on JSN and feeding him the ball that we forgot about other parts of this offense. So for me, when I see we're going to be physical and we're going to have answers, I think that's a big telling reason on why Ryan Grubb is not your offensive coordinator anymore in Seattle, is because he didn't emphasize those parts in his philosophy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about their lack of the running game. What do we even this last game where, from a Grubb standpoint, your job's maybe on the line? What do we start out with? 5 straight passes to begin the game? And you're going, Grubb, really? Is this a middle finger to Mike right now? I literally felt like that was him sticking 2 middle birds right in Mike's face almost in that moment of like, here's your effing run game. And you need to get somebody in there that's in that's that alignment thing. This is somewhat goes to also having the right personnel there to run the scheme you want to run and execute the way you want to run it. I mean, as far as that line goes, but you can't just put this all on the line. There's stuff that goes outside of it, and that lack of run game commitment stands at the forefront to me, really, because it was so jarring. There'd be games where the Charbonnet run on Packers where he runs in for the touchdown. You hadn't run really, I think, all gap that game after living in gap the prior couple of weeks. The counter stuff that you had run, which was just marvelous, and you don't basically run it all in the pack game. The one time you go back to it with the guy back across the formation, he goes and gets a tutty on it. I don't know if we went back to it again in that game, by the way. I think we then led away from it the rest of the game as far as the gap stuff. You're going, dude, what are we doing? It's all this counterintuitive stuff, It works, but we don't want to do it. 3 trick plays on the year. 3 trick plays on the year.
Oh, I know.
All 3 of them worked. Did you go and you watch that with UW with averaging 1 a game, running fakes off the trick plays in UW when he would run them, and it's all that stuff that gives you his extra plays and extra eye candy within the stuff, and just no.
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, I want to get into a couple of these super chats here with you because it kind of talking about Grubb and moving over to some of the other predictions this offseason. I want to get your opinion on, but trust in our head coach was from Johnny A. Strong move in the right direction. But how does this move impact Geno, DK contracts, if at all? Keep up the great work, guys. Hit the like button, y'all. Talking about, you get your thoughts on that. Obviously Geno, start with Geno Smith. I mean, we won't talk about him a lot, but we could. I mean, he's going to take a pretty big cap hit next year. I think it's 44.5. Is that what we're looking at?
If you keep him on the books at that rate, yeah.
Okay, so then he starts becoming your 7th, 8th, highest guy in the league.
You're not going to be able to bring Geno back on the current contract.
Right?
I know that's not a current option.
What do you see the Hawks doing with Geno? Obviously, we all know we need that future guy. How do you see this offseason playing out with him?
This is the most important discussion that we can get into on this channel today beyond the offensive coordinator. Yeah. And you talked about DK, and I think there's a whole long conversation to be had there. I'm a proponent of DK. I'm an advocate of DK, but I think that we have to have a long conversation on this stuff, and it's not an easy one to be had. It's not simply of just rubber stamp it, sign off, you're done, give them the $33 million per year, and we're good. The key question hanging over this franchise right now, and I agree with Johnny, by the way, this is a strong move by the head coach, much like the way he attacked the linebacker situation. This is a little bit in deference of Pete, who you guys just mentioned before, also a little bit light on taking the strong steps that are needed at times, trying to give people the benefit of doubt, a little too stretchy on that one. This team has to decide if they're ready to contend right now. And I'm talking 2025, not 26, 27, because these decisions in regards to Geno and DK are intricately linked to that. They're not separate of that. There is not of this. I don't want to hear this stuff about, well, if you're going to let go of this guy, who's going to be the guy? Tyler's leaving too. Who's going? That's a defeatist attitude. That's not what a smart organization does in attacking roster and player personnel. This guy, value, worth it, not. The replacement stuff is a separate thing altogether. And so I'm not saying this and having a hard line look on Geno or DK. This is really a place I want to have a discussion on as much as anything else. In that I'm torn on this because I do look at this 2025 team and I say, we've for the last 10 years, fellas, have misidentified ourselves. Not you, me, and us. Schneider, Carroll, this team looks at themselves every year and they say, we're a contender. Not we're going to get to the playoffs. We're a contender. They've told it to you. They've been open about it. Year after year after year. Gentlemen, in 10 years, have we been close to a contender? No. So we've had a problem of misidentifying ourselves properly, which then leads us to pull from tomorrow for today. Sacrifice cap space for today. Sacrifice 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick for a safety that we're going to make the highest paid safety who's not really a fit to the defense that we want to run. These are the decisions that we get driven to make when we misidentify ourselves. And so I think the very important decision on this before we get to Geno and DK is, are you a contender in 2025? And if you're not, I think that that's got to, beyond those players' talents and beyond what those guys do, it's got to inform you a bit on this decision-making, especially considering you have no current cap space right now as it stands. Yes, you can pull levers. Yes, you can create cap space, but you're not sitting on some $100 million that you can just float on out there to every which way but loose. I'd like to hear where you guys stand on that. Where are you? Do you as confident enough? Because remember this, it ain't light. It ain't, I think
no, not at all. Bryce, go ahead first, and then I'll go second here.
So one thing that really I found interesting today, and Mike Macdonald's shown, it kind of plays into this, is his comments around Geno. Because Mike Salk asked him, he goes, what's the deal? Is Geno coming back? And Mike's answer, and you can listen to the tone of it. And some people think that it's more of like it's an obvious, obviously.
No, you're onto something with this.
I found it very interesting. He goes, I guess, yeah. John and I have not, basically, I guess, yeah. To me, that is so, when I'm thinking in my perspective, if I was a head coach and I've got conviction about my quarterback and where we're going, I'm going to come out and be like, yeah, damn right, Geno Smith's my quarterback. We're building this thing around him. And I'm going to use terms like that, not sitting there and going, I guess, yeah. At this point, yeah. To me, that's not an indictment that Geno Smith will be here. I think there's, and I'm reading Chris Clough here, who's, a seasoned Seahawks reporter, and he says the same thing. He goes, when Mike Macdonald said, I guess, yeah, about Geno Smith returning to the Seahawks, I translate that to me, John and I have not yet discussed how we want to handle Geno's situation. I think that's the next big thing is going to be what they do with Geno. And I think the biggest problem I have with it all, Brandon, I said this last night with Dan Viens, is, and this is my analogy I've used for this situation with the Seahawks since we traded Russell Wilson. We traded Russell Wilson, and Geno Smith was looked at as the bridge. He was looked at as the bridge quarterback to what's next. Who's our next QB for the next potential 10 years? Who's our next draft pick? Or however we want to do it. You've walked out on Geno Smith bridge, and it's half complete. The front offense has never given us the other side of that bridge. Not once have they really. It wasn't going to be, Sam Howell, as we have found out. It wasn't going to be Drew Lock. There's never been. You're staring and looking at an abyss. It's a fog just sitting there. That's all that's there right now. And this bridge you're standing on with Geno is 35 years old. It's not getting any younger. And, people say, oh, he doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires and he sat a whole bunch of years. There's only 3 quarterbacks in their 40s that have played decent football or good football, and they are all 3 Hall of Famers, and that is Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and Peyton Manning. And even Peyton, when he had his last year in 2015, fell off hard. Yeah. It's not you want to throw a Vinny Testaverde out there that's 40 when he was playing. Vinny was horrible when he was out there, and he wasn't very good in between there. But I hate that argument of, oh, Geno doesn't have a lot of tread. There needs to be an answer. And for me with Geno, if you're going to bring him back, it can't be, okay, cool, we're lining this up for 4 years of Geno being our starting quarterback again. It needs to be, okay, if we tear up his deal as it is currently constructed, because like you alluded to, he can't play on that next year. There's no way. It needs to be with the idea of, okay, we're pivoting to something else. Geno is on like a 2-year deal with us. It's a 2-year deal, but there are outs every year. And that is how we are going forward with this, where if we do find, say they take a guy in this year's draft later on, not first round, because you won't, but say they take Will Howard or Jackson Dart or one of these guys, and he sits for a year, and then all of a sudden you want to turn it over to him, at least you're starting to take a swing at that, building that other side of that bridge. But right now with the Geno cock for me is, and I don't have a problem with Geno. I think Geno is a good quarterback. But I don't think Geno is the solution to the Seahawks quarterback position for the next 10 years. And I don't think he ever was meant to be. But John Schneider, I just think, has been so hesitant to pull the trigger at certain points on quarterbacks and at least take a swing at it. And that's what's driving me nuts with it. So that's where my stance is. And I agree with you. If they put a bunch of money in front of Geno, and I'm talking like the Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, that type of money, you better have some serious answers on how you're going to get this team to be a contender, because there are serious gaps in other places on this roster that need to be addressed. And you said you're not sitting on $100 million worth of salary cap space.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it like to going back to the original question Brandon posed, like, you got to ask yourself, are you a contender? Right, John Schneider, are you a contender? And that's to me the scary part, because again, you try to get in Schneider's head and what he's thinking, because like you said, he always thinks we're a contender. He always thinks we're a piece away. You know what? All we need is to give up the farm for a safety and then pay him the most ever. We are, we're a big receiver away, so I'm going to trade, our center and go get Jimmy Graham and not use him how we were supposed to. So stuff like that. And the thing that I worry about, that finishing 10-7, John's looking at this and saying, well, Mike's first year, we won 10. The offense will get fixed. I think we're a couple of pieces. And to me, I don't think we're that close. I think even if you look at the teams we beat, if you look at who we beat this year, it wasn't that great. We got smacked around by the top teams, and Minnesota, we played them a game, but again, we should have probably won that game. And again, we beat ourselves. Is that a sign of a team that's just not there yet? And I think that if you look at it, we beat two teams with winning records. One was yesterday with their backups in the first game of the year, Bo Nix, rookie quarterback. So I think we're further than John always sort of puts out to the fans. And kind of this is kind of where we are now. We're a middling franchise, and I think there's a lot of frustration from the fans, because not only, like, I agree with Bryce, like, not only now do you have Geno going on possibly year 4 and 5 with this franchise, it wasn't really supposed to be like that. I think when you looked at it, when we traded Russell Wilson originally, you didn't think that was going to be the case. I don't think they did. Now, maybe in the draft, nothing presented itself. Even when we had the number 5 pick, a lot of people said, well, Anthony Richardson, they would have took. And so maybe, but again, when you're middling, you don't get those opportunities, right? Even this past draft, 6 quarterbacks go ahead of us, because we're not great, but we're not bad. So how do you get out of that? And I don't know, man. I think, to me, that's the question. But I think that the way I look at it, I do think he will keep him around, because of the fact that they haven't done anything. They haven't brought in a young guy. What are your thoughts about, do you think they will finally go draft a guy this year to sort of maybe get that process going, if they bring Geno in for a year-to-year type of way, even though there's no like plug and play guy maybe immediately right now, but there is some guys that you look at this draft that, yeah, you know what, it could work out. You sit them for a bit, at least start that process.
Yeah, I'm in total favor of it to a degree. I'm not a damn the torpedoes, go for it, because I think the offensive line has been such an issue for so many years, and it needs to be the point of priority before we talk about quarterback. That thing needs to get fixed and right quick. I think the points you guys make are very good points on this all the way around. In regards to Geno Smith, I think I viewed him as a guy that'd be more of a potential than a bridge quarterback, but you needed to have the stuff set up in front of him, and you haven't done that. And whatever that tread you talk about that he did have, 3 years of taking a pounding behind this offensive line has accelerated that tread being removed off the tires. So that part's kind of is a little about, he's had both of his last 2 years. He's injured at the end of the year. That's happened both of the last 2 times. So this whole thing of, well, he'll be good, strong to go. That's a key component to this, is the age. So this is about timing and things being right when you're a contender. It's not just about how good the guy is. It's about how this team is and where they're at to be ready to go. And a part that I've gotten a lot of pushback from my people on my chat, and people don't want to hear this from me, it sounds like you guys are a little bit open to this, is the thought process of taking the 1 step back to get the 2 steps forward. I know everybody's anxious. I know people want to be a contender. I get that that's where everybody's head's at. I really do. But at the same point in time, I look at this team with that misidentification for 10 years, with the many issues that have to be addressed. I think with the quarterback thing, John's been caught in a pickle where, other than CJ Stroud, who's the real quarterback that he missed out on since that Russell Wilson trade that he should have jumped on? That it's been a little bit of a lean kind of pickings in there as far as the opportunities. But to Bryce's point, this is the unique year where you've got a late 2nd to 4th round. You're going to have about 5 guys in there worthy of being picked in that range who played a lot of college football, who have some good skill and actual decent size, arms. They're not grade A talents, but guys like in that Russell Wilson kind of phase. Because remember that Russell Wilson year, it was a year that you had guys at the top of the draft but then we had Wilson and Cousins in the 3rd round. That you had those kind of talents available there to be picked. So it's a bit like that here, where you can have that 3rd guy fly. Maybe you still maybe you still go get a quarterback next year if you're up in the draft. If you take that step back this year and you're not able to win as many games. But I'm open to doing this because I don't think you can go there with Geno. I don't think the 2-year option is feasible. It's possible, but the scarcity of the quarterbacks on the market, there are only going to be 2 quarterbacks taken probably in the 1st round, unless somebody really wants to stretch for a Jalen Milroe and look for the upper end traits. That's going to pivot then the people that are on the open market to have more value, and those teams that are quarterback hungry to jump on them. Sam Darnold stays with the Vikings. I'm not sure the Vikings even move JJ McCarthy. Now Geno potentially becomes a bit of a bell at the ball as far as being hey, we'll take Geno as our starter here. We're not going to give you maximum draft capital for it, but we'll give him the 3-year extension. We will give him that. We will make him the starter here versus your guys' is maybe not as much commitment to him there in that long term. I wonder if that might push a potential deal on this one to get done.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean I could see it go either way. I mean I really could, and like I said, because of if Pete was still here, maybe I'd lean definitely towards one direction. But I think because of what we've seen so far with Mike, and he's quick to say, look, this isn't working. Get these linebackers. So I'm cutting this guy now. I'm cutting. My OC's out. 15 hours after I played my last football game. So for me, I also wouldn't be surprised, like you said. I don't think you can get there with Geno. You can't. It's too hard. You're not going to win only 5 games with Geno Smith as your quarterback. You won't be able to take that step back. So do they get the money off the books? Do they just completely say, look, we got to take a step back, and then and I know the tough thing for a lot of fans, I think, because like you said, he's misdiagnosed for so long that you're just so anxious to be like, let's just get this going. Like maybe we are only a few pieces away. Just we could get to that 12-win mark. And even a lot of people would say, we could easily had 12 this year. We should have beat the Giants, and we should have, the Rams game when Geno threw 2 red zone picks. I mean, that's all easy enough to say. But this is the NFL. Look, they didn't deserve to win either of those games. So you can sit back here and dissect after the fact and say, well, we should have won this. Should you have? I don't think so. Again, are we misdiagnosing how good this team is? I mean, our home record was horrible this year. So why should we have beat the New York Giants? I mean, so you look at all that stuff and say, maybe, yeah, it is a good thing. And it's tough to go through a season like that because that Seattle fans, especially, there's a lot of new fans, they've never had to experience that, where you've taken a step back and only won maybe 4 or 5 games. That's tough, especially, coming off back-to-back Super Bowls. And so even that, we had good, we had decent seasons, but again, never in contention. So I think it's for me, I'm looking at this offseason too. It's just a wait and see approach for me. It's hard to call these things just because, now it's John working alongside with Mike. John's got it's really talk about the hot seat potentially for John. What's he going to do? Is it going to be some big splash moves and he's going to, or and that's what you got to look at too. I think, if John, a lot of people think he possibly is on the hot seat, does he want to do that and take that step back? What's your thoughts about that? You've heard a lot of people talk about that, like Schneider's, this is the make or break season potentially for him this offseason. He's on a hot seat. Do you see that, or do you see his job? I know he's safe this year, but I'm talking about if he has another, say, 9-8 or 10-7, and we do kind of similar stuff. Is it sort of a hot seat situation for John?
Well, that's where we come back to. I think this is very important for the committee that's over the top of John, for Jody Allen, to recognize the situation and what's necessary here. Not that we have a general manager who's been here for 14 years. We haven't but 1 playoff win since 2017. Time to go, John, or you're out. If John was on a hot seat, even just a little warm, if it was just mildly warm, last year when you moved on from Carroll, you moved John at the same time. You don't give him the opportunity to hire his new coach. And then a year later, you're moving him out, and then the new general manager comes in, and what's he going to want to do? Unless Mike Macdonald's having a smashing success, which if you're moving on from John, he's probably not. Now that guy's going to want his coach. Why? Because if Macdonald goes out there and gets success with that new GM in here, how much credit does that GM get? I know this seems ridiculous, but there's egos involved here. And new general managers come in, they want to hire their guys. New owners come in, they want to hire their new general managers. This is the nature of the beast a little bit. And so you start to get into that spin cycle thing, which I don't really like. That's not a visionary plan. That's a reactionary thing in the moment. Part of why I want to be a little bit more longer looking in this. I know it might be hard from Jody in the perspective of doing this. I think that John's got some worries to me about him when it comes to, for instance, the offensive line and the way he spends money in free agency that have me worried about maybe he's got his own little fatal flaws that he can't ever overcome again to get back to where he got, but I'm not sure on it yet. And I think you got to give it at least 2 years on that before you get to that spot. The 3 years you'd give Macdonald as a new coach is the 3 years I think you got to give John on this. I will say if he does go to the offensive line in the same way this offseason, one pick in the 3rd round, one old ass free agent on his last legs that you're trying to wring out the last bit of productivity from, 1 5th or 6th round pick at the back end, you can miss me with that. I want no part of it. So I will be a bit harsh on him if we get to the other side of it and he does that piddly Annie stuff once again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Bryce, you back or?
Oh, I'm good. I'm back. Sorry, I just was reading something while you guys were talking, and I was listening to what you guys were talking because I was reading Corbin Smith's kind of behind the article here on Grubb and stuff and what kind of occurred there. But to the John Schneider point, guys, I kind of agree to a point with some of what our comments are getting put in there. Like, he doesn't really have a memo to take a step back. Like Jody and them have made, when they fired Pete, it was, we're going forward. We're still going. And to an extent, I look at this move and like, I'm in favor of a 2-step back, 4-step forward kind of approach where you suffer for a year or two. Well, maybe not even suffer, but you take those steps back, you kind of recoup, and then you go forward with more force going forward. I don't know if they're going to get that opportunity. And I think this firing to an extent of Ryan Grubb, to tie it in a little bit, is more of a sign that we think we're a contender than we think we're in a rebuild. And I get the alignment thing. We talked about fatal flaws. But to me, it's just, it makes me wonder that too, if they just think that if we get a new OC in here, then things will be great. I think there's a part of that maybe is what they're thinking. But I look at this team and there's so many holes that, at the beginning of the year, we didn't think were holes. Like if we all sat down, none of us thought the cornerback room was going to be potentially an area of weakness going into the next year. We had, Witherspoon and Wolin and Trey Brown. Like we thought our top 3 were great. Mike Jackson, we traded away because we're like, oh, we're blooming with talent. It's not looking that way. Wolin looks like he's going to be potentially a liability. He's got concentration concerns. He's got, out partying concerns. He's got all these things. The only one in there, like besides Witherspoon, that looks like he's going to do anything or maybe be a piece you can build on is a Josh Jobe that could just be a younger version of Mike Jack for us now.
And Trey Brown didn't really do any club control. He's only got 1 year of club control left.
So you gotta figure out that situation. Like cornerbacks now a need for this team where you might be addressing it in the draft. And we've talked about obviously to nauseam the interior of this offensive line. And there's parts of this where I look at it and I go, the Seahawks are stuck in the mud. And they're like a tire in a car that's spinning its wheels, trying to get traction. They get a little bit and they think they're out of that hole. And then they find themselves in another one. They need to get some sort of a semblance of what do we want to be and stop trying to recreate what they already were. That's one thing I think that's gotten us in this hole a little bit to an extent is we kept trying to either recreate the LOB and recreate that success that Pete had. Okay, that was great success that we had. But as we talked about offense and defense and the evolution of football and how it goes through, you go through cycles and changes. They need to figure out what their next evolution is as an organization, not just on the field, but the entirety of this organization. And until they do that and actually commit to it, I think this could be a thing where we're just up and down. 1 year we'll win 11 games and maybe win a playoff game and lose in the division round. And then the next year we're struggling to make a wild card spot. Like that's just how I think it is until this gets sorted out. That's just at least my take on it.
I think it's a fair take. I think that's the mandate that you just mentioned is probably a very accurate assessment of the situation. And that mandate does not necessarily mean you're doing things intelligently, right? A mandate is a mandate. It's, hey, just do this. Wait, you want to think about that and do it, but think about just get it done. That's not smart. That's not what intelligent. And to your point, that's going to lead to a lot of varying of results. And can you become that one team where you magically kind of groove the mark and get through on a year for 12 wins to your point? Yeah. But then does that make you a contender in that way? Does that make you feel like that contender when you get in the playoffs? This year we walked into it. The contenders that we thought were going to be contenders became the contenders by and large. There's like one Viking team that you might mention, but all the rest of them, from your Chiefs to your Ravens to your Eagles to your Lions, all teams we knew walking into this, that's what they're going to be. It seems like that's kind of where if you really want to be that team that we're going to compete for a Super Bowl, you got to be more than we guess. Well, if this breaks right and that breaks right, this thing goes that way and this guy develops and that grows and this, then it'll all work out. I hate that thought process. Do it intelligently. I like the thought of just going a little bit back to get forward. I'm okay with it, but you're right. They may not allow that to go down. I just don't think that that's going to be what's best for this organization in the long term if they take that approach. And we're not going to get back to winning Super Bowls with that approach, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you kind of saw that with the O-line as far as like, hey, if everything lines up, we can be okay. You signed Connor Williams off an ACL. Well, if he gets back to form, we got a center. If Abe gets right, it looks like maybe he'll be on his way to getting healthy. But it was just I felt like, especially his free agency this past offseason, like throwing darts on the board. Hopefully a few of these guys pan out. And I agree, it's not really the best way to do it. But I'm going to fire through just, we got a few super chats.
Go for it, Ryan.
Just to get them up on the board here before we forget about them. But, this is obviously up a little while ago, but talking about going back to Grubb, my belief that there are some coaches who belong in college while others belong in the pros. Grubb was doing too much of a run and shoot-esque offense. Doesn't fly in the NFL anymore.
So can I actually say something to that? Because like I was saying, I was reading Corbin's article, which I suggest everyone read because it's got some good insight. So it talks about the Giants game, which is a game we've all talked about. We shouldn't have lost that game. That game we should have won. The Giants were an inferior team and really showed it. Basically what he talked about was how someone close to the team says, they went in with a super pass heavy offensive mindset. Ken Walker wasn't used at all, which we can all really attest to in that game. He wasn't. And basically a team source remarked with, he thought he was facing Stanford or something, harking back to his Pac-12 dominance. His confidence in his quarterback wasn't misguided, but he took one of our best players out of the game with his own stubbornness. Like that from a team source, that's a pretty damning remark. And then they go on to say at another point here, Grubb makes, obviously he made his thing in the publicly about, it's my fault, so on and so forth. And they go back to the talk about the Packers game. They didn't give, apparently in the Packers game, the marriage already on the rocks, according to a source. Grubb put the dagger in his chances of returning as offensive coordinator the ensuing week against the Vikings, this time failing to meet Macdonald's standards from time management and game flow perspective. After Darnold threw the touchdown to Jefferson with 4 minutes left, Macdonald wanted Grubb to bleed the clock after they got into field goal range and use Kenny McIntosh and Zach Charbonnet to give themselves a shot to make the Vikings use their timeouts and position themselves for a tying field goal because they were already in Jason Myers' range. Instead, Grubb called another pass play out of shotgun, allowing Andrew Van Ginkel to crash the pocket and sack Smith for a 6-yard loss. That cost them that game. So you can kind of see, and this is another comment from the team source, it became disillusioned and incompatible. There wasn't any other decision that could have been made by Mike other than to fire Ryan Grubb.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's damning stuff. I think it's all true. You talked about structure versus player. I think that's a very also one that I keep thinking about a little bit as we're talking about this being at the wider hash marks. What he liked to do is he'd run those trips to one side of the field. He'd isolate his playmaker to the other side of the field, a lot of times far side. So he trips to the near side and far side it with your single guy with Huskies and then isolate that guy and one-on-one and then just let Penix, blister the ball in there on a back shoulder fade or just play it off the leverage a little bit. And so you can't, it's not as simple as that, the NFL. And yeah, that time management stuff, I thought we saw that throughout too, where there was a complete lack of awareness for it at all. But lack of awareness was a little bit of Grubb at the centerpiece of this. The offensive line issues were what they were. And yeah, I understand want to be a spread concept guy that takes shots down the field. But the problem is that you don't have the offensive line to allow you the 7-step drops. And I know we have moments like DK screaming into the mic saying, can we please throw across the effing sticks? But that was not the issue by and large for this year, where there's too much of extending it beyond the sticks, trusting that pass protection, that play that you just talked about with the Vikings. You're trusting a pass protection that's not been good. And you got to work around what you have. And sometimes some of your best work is done if you're a good OC or DC for that matter, worth your salt. Some of your best work is done working without the most supporting parts around you. Okay, you don't have an offensive line. You got DK Metcalf, JSN, Tyler Lockett, 2 dynamic running backs, good tight ends on the outside. You can't just go, well, I'm only at my best when I have everything around me cooking at its best. Brian Flores is a great example of this. Flores came into that Vikings defense last year with not very much talent, some, but not, it wasn't stacked up, but he was going to get everything out of it. He was going to get them to perform above where their talent level was at. This year, Grubb got this talent level to perform below where their talent level actually is at. And that's an indictment squarely on his shoulders.
Yeah, just get through a couple more of these real quick here. I don't know what this one means. Real quick, the DK headset doesn't look as bad anymore, eh? I never thought. I kind of thought.
Yeah, now that you think about DK losing in the San Francisco game, it kind of
with the headset, right? Just kind of puts it all in perspective.
It puts it in
that's the thing.
perspective.
The players all year must have been frustrated as hell. I couldn't even imagine. But yeah, talk me off a ledge. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's if you can wrap your head around, I think you guys said that you might sense that this, and I think it's kind of early to tell because there's an argument to be made. This is a bit of an acceptance of the 1 step back to 2 steps forward. Because if you want to keep continuity and get the benefits of Grubb into year 2, you're not firing him on that. You're kind of resetting a bit of that. Now, Pete's is the bit of the nullifier on this because you're still remaining in continuity at that point with him remaining in house if you do hire him. So that's a bit of the walk, but I think we'll be good. It's the right decision on this. I really do. I was leaning to thinking this probably, and I feel more and more right, the more especially hear some of those quotes come out because they confirm what was our greatest theories on what we do watching this from the outside, right? You're thinking, hey, this guy's not doing this. This is stupid. Like, this isn't stuff. All this stuff isn't like real intricate stuff from our aspect and looking at it and seeing it. Like lack of running game commitment, lack of working right personnel, just stubbornness at times in your play calling. It's very straightforward stuff from Mike Macdonald. He didn't have to think too hard on this.
Right.
Well,
good point.
The thing for me with the spread, like I know you brought it up a second ago there, Brandon, the spread concept and how the spread offense works. In college, the spread offense is very different than how it runs at the pro level due to the hashes and how you can pull defenses horizontally because of how you can get your formation set up. And the one concept with the spread that I don't think, a lot of people think of the spread and they think of, deep shots down the field. A big component of getting those shots down the seam and stuff in the spread offense is because you run the ball well inside and you force linebackers to collapse. We never got that part of this offense. You had running backs in Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh, K9 to do that, but we never consistently had some sort of identity running the ball. We never were a gap power. Hey, we're going to run hard in between the tackles, even if it's for 3 yards. And we're going to do that. And then when we set up play action off of it, we're going to get that one outside linebacker to creep in and hesitate. And then we hit the seam shot to like a Noah Fant down the seam there. Like Noah Fant's touchdown yesterday where he got flipped over his head. Part of that was because you actually ran the ball somewhat successfully and you could actually get linebackers to potentially creep in. And you left a running back in the backfield on that area of the field where we didn't do that versus Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, how many pounds do you need to add to play right guard here?
Sure.
That's a good question.
Well, wait, do I get to be in a mobility scheme? If I get to be a mobile guy like a Shanahan kind of guard, like a dad, like Mike Shanahan style. If I can go 280, I could probably get to. It'd take a lot to get 280. I'm on 190. I'd have to. I'm going 90 pounds, man. I'd have to be doing a heavy amount, but I can do the mobility stuff. You're not going to be able to ask me to do the stuff at the point of attack. I'm not going to be able to root down. My anchor is going to be weak, but you need me to move out in space and go climb and find a linebacker. I got you. I'll get a hat on a hat.
Hey, Brandon would be the perfect pulling guard for me. Pin pull, just get him downfield, going on a corner.
Right. It's all timing, brother, right? I just got to, for a half second, I just got to hold it for a half second. I got to get pushed. I just got to shield him for a half second. I'm good.
Exactly. Get that seal and we're gone right up the field.
Free me more, Seahawks. Appreciate it. One dimensional offense equals quarterback pressure by default. Yeah, I mean, pretty much, and also just predictability, knowing what we were going to run felt like 90% of the time, right?
Yeah, defenses knew it. That's for sure. Boy, I haven't seen an offense that had so many pre-snap keys for defenses to know what was going on post-snap over and over again. It was kind of wild to watch.
And our good friend Dan Beans, yeah, there he is. Wow, appreciate that super chat. And
cool question for you guys.
Doesn't even have a question, but Dan, we appreciate that, man. Dan's been an awesome supporter of the show, even since the beginning that we've started here. So appreciate that a lot, Dan. Thank you very much.
I've been on Dan a couple times with on his side too. So Dan, I hope you're doing good out there, man. I know you're probably in favor of this move, so I'm sure he's feeling pretty good about it on that side. One guy we didn't talk about with this, and I know Bryce, you're pro on this with this guy, but I think one place we got to walk down the line on this 1 step back, 2 steps forward in consideration is the DK side of this, because let's take this a little bit in potentially the way this could go. You keep Geno. there's kind of two different ways. You keep Geno, do you keep DK? If you let go of Geno, and there's not a pathway to having a quarterback in here, but that is a Will Howard, Jackson Dart competing with Sam Howell, Zach Wilson. Okay. These kind of alignments, right? Is it so much straightforward at that point that you're paying DK a $33 million per year deal as we go forward at that point?
Yeah, that's for me. The DK situation kind of has to, it really gravitates around what you do with Geno, I think, in a lot of ways. If you're able to get a bridge and have Geno for, whatever you're going to do for the 1 year and you think you are going to contend, which I got a feeling they're going to pay DK. John Schneider gives me that vibe. You got to kind of question that. Like if you have a Will Howard or one of these young guys playing and you are taking that 2-step back, I don't know if it does make sense. And I love DK, but I don't know if it does at that point, because what you're putting there is you're putting also in a way a lot of pressure on a young guy to feed the ball to a high paid receiver. People, he's going to be asking for it, so on and so forth. And it could cause issues that way. That was the one thing that was great for Russell, I think, in a lot of ways when he came into Seattle and started, was we didn't have a star receiver. Yes, we had Sidney Rice, but Sidney Rice wasn't looked upon as a top 5, top 10 NFL receiver. He was looked upon as a good starting receiver, and we, I think, overpaid a little bit for Sidney Rice when we did.
He was injured a lot too.
And he was injured a lot. But you had kind of no-name guys. You had Golden Tate, who kind of emerged in 2012, late 2011. Doug Baldwin was undrafted. You didn't have this necessity of, I have to feed this player a certain amount of targets a game as a young quarterback. I could just kind of go back, drop back, make something happen, and find one of these guys. And I think that worked to Seattle's benefit. Now, on the flip side, doing that, now I think that could be a serious question on if you do go with the young quarterback and go that direction, you might need to allocate the money somewhere else than with DK Metcalf. And I think that's a very serious question. That's why I think now that they've done Grubb, I think the next thing will be to hire their OC. And I think they're going to have the OC in place within the next, I'd say 2 weeks. I think max 2 weeks.
I think there's two lanes we got to look at going here, in my opinion, see if you guys buy into it. The mandate exists. All right. Therefore, Geno gets signed, Deco gets signed. Now the next thing you do on top of those two signings, Ernest Jones will get signed, is you're going to go out there and you're not just going to sign a Trey Smith. You're going to go Trey Smith and Tevin Jenkins.
Yep.
You're going down the mandate side, then you better effing put that pedal down to that metal, hit the NOS button,
Stomp it through the floor.
rocket engine fuel, all that stuff. And this is talking as a guy that's perfectly happy taking the one step back, but I don't want middle of the effing road here. I want one step or the other. So the other step is pivot one step back. Geno goes, DK goes, probably Arik Woolen goes. You offset assets at that point. You pivot this around. You get your cap situation right. You got great cap situation 26, 27, and you get that Howard. You get that Dart. And yes, you still look for a quarterback in the future. I mean, it's not something that now you got to have them guys. You start to just start this process in the right way. So I think it's just pick that lane. Don't do the middle of we'll sign this guy, but then we'll just try to draft this.
100%.
Yeah. And that's my only scary thing. Like, will he stop at that, or like to your point? You put the gas to the floor and you hit it. Like, does he go out? Because we feel like it feels like he will lean that way. Like he'll sign Geno and he'll extend DK. Like I feel like that. But then to your point, does he go all the way? And that's where, do you believe in Schneider doing it, especially that he, we all go back to the comment he makes about guards, right? But he probably wish he never said that. But it's just, so that's why I see the wait and see approach. But I agree. I think you go. I think most Seahawks fans are like, you got to be tired of the middling. You got to be tired of it, and that's where you'll be if you just go Geno, DK, and sort of maybe get someone else like a late guy when everything's all said and done, like they did with Lake and Tomlinson, and what they maybe this guy will pan out here and we won't have to worry about it. But I think I mean, I hope you're right. If they do that, go all the way. I'm in total agreement of that.
Like I said, you go back for years: Luke Jokel, Austin Blythe, Evan Brown, Gabe
BJ
Finney, Lake and Tomlinson. This is the approach they go over and over and over again with this, and it's failed. Meanwhile, if you want to look from John Schneider's perspective at, hey, do I want to change my ways at this? Has there been teams that have had success going like this? Chiefs go win their first Super Bowl. Fisher, Schwartz, good interior guard. Guard goes. Fisher and Schwartz physically erode, and they're done. So far done by the point that they are lost halfway through the year as they're going to another Super Bowl run. They get collapsed by Tampa Bay in that game from a pass protection standpoint. Mahomes is running for his life. What did the Chiefs do that offseason? They say this is never going to happen with Patrick Mahomes again. We're going to trade for Orlando Brown. We're going to draft Creed Humphrey. We're going to spend the money for the best left guard in the open market. We're still going to buy Austin Blythe. The year before we paid Austin Blythe, they paid him $4 million just to be a backup of his insurance for Creed Humphrey. You take it beyond the mark. You go to crazy town. And what did it do for the Chiefs, Bryce? It worked. It worked, right?
Well, that's what's so frustrating, Brandon, about John Schneider's comments on 710 in the pregame when they asked him about that. And he goes, well, we've never been a big free agency team. Yeah. And you know what? You never have built a good freaking O-line. Yeah. You haven't. You've never built one here where you can actually look at it.
You did in 13. But guess what, Bryce? You spent more money than any other NFL team in this league.
You paid for finally. Like, it's kind of that thing of you pay for what you want. If you want quality, you're going to have to spend more money to get quality. And that's where I'm so frustrated with John Schneider on this. And it's like, get Trey Smith. Okay, great. You've signed Trey Smith. You know what? Go talk to Cleveland about Wyatt Teller and go get Wyatt Teller. Go trade. You don't just have to spend in free agency. Right. Go trade some capital. You've drafted what? Lamea, Jarrell, Olu, you got UDFA Sundell, you've got Haynes, you drafted 5 offensive linemen right now, not to mention Cross and Lucas. Go get some veteran quality talent so those guys can develop underneath them. Do the Philadelphia Eagles model. They love to bring in and have veteran guys, and then they develop their youngsters underneath them. When their veteran guys are ready to move on, they have guys waiting in the rings that are actually capable of playing at a high level because they properly developed them. And that's the one thing I want more than anything is the pro development and scouting department needs to be looked at, because you talked about the coaching staff failing last year in development and all. It's also on the scouting department too. Like, you haven't successfully cultivated a great offensive line here in Seattle. So then whoever's scouting them, whoever's involved in those decisions outside John Schneider, you need to look at that. And you seriously need it. Steve Hutchinson may not be great at identifying talent. Yes, he was a Hall of Fame left guard, but he may not be great at identifying talent. Why do you think Peyton Manning has never come to coach in the NFL? Hall of Fame quarterback, but he even knows his limitations. He's like, yeah, I don't want to coach. I don't think I can coach. Some guys just don't have the ability. Let's not forget that Steve Hutchinson was the one that slammed the fist for Stone Forsythe's going to be a starting caliber tackle in this league.
I agree 100%. And Steve is the kind of guy that goes into that crosshairs a little bit. You mentioned trades, because this is the part that I talked to EJ about this actually a couple weeks ago, where I said, I've got a theory on this. And that is that we don't see these interior offensive line trades or trades in general. And I go, and what the given narrative out there is that you don't see them because teams aren't willing to give them up. I don't think it was true to us, AJ. And he bought this on this. Let's see if you buy this as well. What it is you have people that operating like John Schneider is on this, where they go, I don't want to give it up. And they don't want to give the extra. The one trade we've made in 7 years, the one trade we made in John Schneider's whole time for a quality offensive lineman, Dwayne Brown, 2017, absolute desperate trade in the moment. You need to make it, right? So you trade it to Texans. They get Jeremy Lane. They get buyer's remorse going, ooh, we should have gotten more for it. You know what? Failed physical for Jeremy Lane. Give us a third. We want another third now. Did we say no? Did we say, no, that's too much cost, we can't go buy it? Or just, here's the third. And it was money well spent, and you paid him money, and it was great. It worked perfectly. Never going down that road again. Why? It worked well. And he was buying on it. Don't you buy it as well? As that? I think there's these general managers, and he said it to me. He's like, yeah, I've had some even Bears guys I've talked to in the player personnel, and I've shake my head because they're like, yeah, we wouldn't even spend a second round pick on a center. And I'm like, exactly, EJ, exactly. They will not. They have this like weird 2007 view of line play or something in the interior, especially, and it's like, expand, bro. Get outside of it. This is not working.
The thing for me, Brandon, the biggest thing that changed my view on line play, I was listening to Sean Payton talk, and this is when he was in his heyday with the Saints and Drew Brees, and they were dicing up teams. Most of their money was allocated to center, left guard, right guard. They had a pocket passing quarterback. Where has, if you look at the NFL, a lot of the guys, we drafted one to be a game wrecker, which is Byron Murphy, to be in the interior and game wreck, because there is a serious weakness throughout the NFL in talent at the interior line position. tackles, if you have a pocket passing quarterback like a Geno Smith, he wants to step up in the pocket. He doesn't want to run around. Lamar Jackson, doesn't matter what you do, you can put a great line in front of him. Lamar's going to make people miss. It's just what's going to happen. But when you have that pocket guy, fortify the front of him so he can step up. If your tackles are average or above average, and they, look at Sam Darnold in Minnesota. Look at that line that they've built there. Like, they lost their starting left tackle. They got Cam Robinson, who's an average tackle. He's not great, but they're fortified the first three guys in front of him, and he's able to step up in the pocket, not last night, but in general, and throw the ball.
Yeah.
The interior O-line needs to be an area that is attacked. Like you talked about, gas pedal to the floor. You need to punch the freaking pedal through the floor and just go. You better be doing Fred Flintstone and running on the ground. You've stomped so hard to get that pedal going in the right direction. But we got a couple more super chats in here.
I think about Peyton too, by the way, that those guys did was that they were good all around interior linemen. But what Peyton did, and this was actually a thing that drove me crazy with Wilson that we didn't do as well, the passing lanes. I'm going to structure this so the first read comes back to the slant on the backside, and the guard is going to clear that passing lane out so that undersized quarterback now has a viewpoint where he wouldn't typically have the viewpoint being able to see over the treetops. And that's something that we never really did for us to ever allow the on-time stuff to work. And that's where Peyton's just kind of a next level guy on how he structures stuff. By the time he got Wilson, it was a different player at that point. I'm talking
exactly.
Prime Russ, not where Russ was when he went to Denver, of course.
So we got feed more Seahawks. I believe full offseason we could see creativity. That's possible. We could see it. We've got Thomas Cox here for $5. Thanks, Thomas. You've been in the chat the whole time. If Pete's or whoever does a great job, I'll be the one to say he did a great job. Right now, listening to Corbin, you guys and Brando, I understand that. Thanks. And he comes back with another one here for $2.
What was he saying on that? I was trying to understand what did he mean by that on that?
I think what he's alluding to is we were talking about Jake Peets and potentially if he's the guy they anoint as the OC. What Thomas is saying here is if he does great, I'll be the one to say he did a great job because I think he doesn't believe in Peets necessarily right now as a potential candidate for it or the right guy. And that's what he's kind of saying to, with it now. Comes back with, who's your OC if you could put money on it? So, Brandon, I'll start with you. If you had to put money on it right now and you're sitting in Vegas, who are you putting your money on for Seahawks OC?
Yeah, it's got to be Pete's to me. I just think there's too much that's leaked out on this. I think that it's also about the dearth of possibilities that are out there. It doesn't seem like Black Monday was quite as a black a period as it normally is at the end of seasons. And so that means there are just not as many candidates. Maybe you thought they're about to like a McDaniel type. Some people were dreaming of that type, or Stefanski or something like that. So you're kind of going to be stuck, I think, just, staying in-house to what is. And they seem very excited by Pete's. So it's another discussion for us to get down to at some point, though, with this. And if you're doing the Rams offense, getting back a little bit to the DK stuff, and this again goes, you're running offense, get the right personnel. Came in here with Waldron before. You need mobile offensive linemen. You didn't go with mobile offensive linemen. You want to bring in, again, this Rams scheme and system. You have to operate it off of understanding that Yak is a big component of what makes this system work. Got a guy like DK, for instance, not necessarily the ideal route runner or Yak guy on that. You go to the fit. This is a little bit of the Tyler Lockett issue, too, with having him in this offense. It's a contested catch offense. It's a Yak offense. Well, those aren't two things that Tyler really did. That's part of the reason it didn't really work as well with him in there. So you got to have your personnel fit to the scheme you're running as well. If we're going to go that scheme, then you got to get the exact personnel to fit it, not force fit them into it, like we kind of have done recently.
Agreed. I've been saying, Ryan's heard me say it for probably a good 4 weeks now, that I think it's going to be Jake Peets will be the new OC of the Seattle Seahawks. I think a lot of the tidbits, things I've talked to with certain people, that he is really liked in that building, especially by Mike Macdonald for one. And I agree, you have to get certain personnel. The one thing that'll be interesting, though, is the Rams offense has changed, and it kind of changed from being what you said with this more smaller, quicker offensive line. The last few years with Stafford and when Peets has been there, they went to a bigger offensive line, a little bit more gap power than what McVay had run previously. Either way, if it ends up being Peets, then commit to what his vision is and make sure it aligns, obviously, with Mike Macdonald's, and they're in alignment. But go hard at that. Don't kind of do what you said earlier, Brandon, and don't go, okay, we'll go a little bit here, but then we're going to go a little bit, like, just go to it, commit to it, and go. And if it burns and crashes, at least you can say you did it with conviction. And that's my biggest kind of gripe, is that they've never really done that. So That's who I think it is. Ryan, who do you think it's going to be?
It's hard to say, but I think if he aligns with Mike and his vision and the fact that he's been in the NFL for as long as he has, and all the points you guys mentioned coming from McVay, then I think you take a shot, and I think Mike would be comfortable with that. So I do think if you're putting money on it, and some of the things you heard, then I think we're all in agreement right now. So yeah, we'll see. And Bryce, like to your point, I think it's going to be a decision that won't take too long. So I think you'll see something in this month for sure. So yeah, wait and see. I mean, this offseason is going to get crazy. We won't be on too much longer here. But Brandon, I want to get your just kind of thoughts on what any other predictions do you see happening in this offseason besides I mean, I know we've just talked about a long time, like this could go two ways. Do they take a step back? What are you really leaning towards though? If you're in John Schneider's head and what he's thinking, what do you really think that if you could throw out some predictions that's going to maybe happen in the next couple months here in this offseason?
I think the mandate's going to probably wear out over necessarily taking more of the patient approach, just because that's the lane they've been in last many years. It's hard to, if you're going to predict somebody to change off that, you got to see a little bit more proof that it's going to happen. And I'm okay with that. I just want them to make sure that they commit to it, which I don't think they've always done. And sometimes you've been held up by cap space situations. You're kind of a little bit by that, but not fully, because you can pull from 26 and 27 where you're top 3 in cap space in both of those 2 years as it stands right now. So you are in a position to do that if you want to do that. But if the team were to take a patient approach, I think I would like to maybe more see that. I think the points we've made about all the work that needs to be done on this team can't be undersold. You'd need to probably go find 2 corners. I don't think Reek's going to be a long-term guy here. That disciplinary issue that he had during that week, right after he had the worst game of the year, that was a tough look for Reek. And it doesn't look like Mike Macdonald seems to be a guy that's going to go softly into that good night at times. He's willing to bring down the gavel and the hammer. We'll see with Ernest Jones what happens there. You need to go find another viable nose tackle. We're going to be stuck a little bit with the situation when it comes to Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy here, guys. I mean, that thing's going to be a little bit kinky and it's first world problems, but you don't have a pathway for Byron to the 3 tech in the future. Part of why I hope maybe they can kind of open up some stuff with him off the edge a little bit this offseason. A little bit of how Aaron Donald got used with the Rams at times, where if you just, rather than forcing him to the nose tackle again for another full year, just and like that. But you need nose. You're going to need 3 interior offensive linemen. You're going to move off from Noah Fant. You're going to need another H-back tight end. You're going to need another 2 wide receiver. We'll see what happens with the DK thing. There's a good amount here that needs to be addressed on top of the important decisions looming over your number 1 receiver, number 1 quarterback. So it seems like a lot of work. Take a step back, be patient. But if I'm making the prediction, I think it's you go hard. I don't think that they sign those 2 guys I mentioned in free agency. I don't think you probably get one of them. I think he takes kind of the similar stance where he's going to try to sign some 32-year-old guard who was good in 2019. Or was a number 1 overall pick in 2017 or something as the interior, and it'll go like that again, which is disappointing. But hey, everybody's got their blind spots, I suppose.
Yeah, Bryce, go ahead.
Well, I agree with everything Brandon said. To me, what this move signals, though, and my thought that I think Jake Peetz will be the offensive coordinator in 2 weeks. I think they'll interview people, quote unquote, as they do, and then it'll circle back to Peetz, and Peetz will get the job. The interesting thing will be, and we haven't really talked about this, is Scott Huff, because he hasn't actually been relieved of duties. He's still here. And if you listen to Mike Macdonald's conversation today, a lot of people took it as, oh, Scott Huff's safe. I took it as there hasn't been a decision made on Scott Huff, because either Scott Huff might want to go where Ryan Grubb goes if he goes back to Alabama or wherever, or be the new offensive coordinator. Even if it is Jake Peetz, he may want to bring somebody in. And I threw this idea out last night that Jake Peetz may want somebody who's familiar with what, the McVay tree does. And one of the O-line guys that have either worked with Kevin O'Connell, Zach Taylor, Andy Dickerson just got let go. And I know I think Brandon was thinking that's where I was going with it.
Yeah.
But there's a possibility of that. So I wonder if that's the case and where that kind of goes. But I take this move as they view themselves as contenders, and that's why they made the move. I think then if that's the case, put your damn foot to the floor. Go upgrade this team the way you need to upgrade it. Make the hard decisions you're going to have to make, but at least be convicted in what you're doing.
Yeah.
The Panthers, we mentioned the Chiefs with this. That's not an outlier, though. The Panthers took this approach last offseason. First $20 million guard in the NFL. That was for a right guard. And you gave $13 million to Damian Lewis. And he's not a $13 million left guard. But the returns for the Panthers. You get a guy going from Bryce Young, who people early on in the year go, he was maybe bust. Are they going to trade him mid-season? Is he done? To by the end of the year with that line stability, you now have them more reinforced on him in the long term. There's to me, a lesson to be learned staring you right in the face, right there in the immediacy, in the here and now, not 10 years ago, but right now it's occurring to say you can take this same path. Yeah,
no, I agree. I think they do think they're contenders. I mean, I think, if things fall their way, especially on this defense, I think if we believe in Mike and the decisions, it feels like he knows what he wants for this defense to be super successful. I mean, we've seen it with the linebackers midseason that we've touched on a couple times, and I just think, so if we can get a few more pieces in here and make some moves that Mike believes in, hey, this is exactly the types of players I need. New OC fits his way of thinking. Then like Bryce and you guys have mentioned, go get some good veteran guard play, and I think we could see a big turnaround. So, I mean, this is a step in the right direction, in my opinion, with today's news with Grubb. Now it's just making the next guys you bring in the right move. So, yeah, we'll see. Guys, I mean, it's been a great show. Any final thoughts? What do you guys?
We didn't talk a lot about Macdonald, but I do think Macdonald is the right guy here.
Yes,
I think he is the answer. I think part of the fun of what's watching this is you mentioned about the Rams and the transition they've made to the 1,000 pounds of mass humanity on their interior, their offensive line, instead of those mobile-based guys. And what he's trying to do, of course, is go after the cover two shells that are out there now and the four-man fronts. And these four-man fronts get widened out at times where you'll have two wide nines and two inside. So how does he counter that's going to be kind of the fun part. And you saw a little bit of what McVay did to him in this last game, what the Chiefs did last year in the conference championship as well, with some of those little just pop pass throws out to the flat and screen game stuff. It's going to be interesting to watch with Macdonald, his adjustments to that in the future, because this seems to be the way to go at this defense by some of the teams this year. We saw the Packers do some similar stuff to us as well.
The other thing that'll be interesting to that, Brandon, as well, and this is what I think you saw with the Vikings did it to us. The Packers did it to us with Mike LaFleur. As we talk about how Mike Macdonald was so good with his simulations and how much these guys move around, how many teams were quick snapping the Seahawks defense and they weren't taking these long counts. So how does that change Mike Macdonald's, way of how he's going to simulate pressure and what he's going to do? Because if teams are quick snapping you constantly, you can't move around a lot, either post or pre-snap, because you get caught out of position. And I think a few times with those pop passes, that's what you saw teams do, is they quick snap, threw it to the flat. No one was in the right position at the time because they hadn't done the rotation or any of that in their simulated blitz. And so it'll be interesting to see how he handles that going forward into the next season.
Absolutely. But he's a smart guy, and he's a guy that's, I think, he's got that kind of mind that can keep adjustment. He's not rigid to his scheme of, well, that's my scheme. My scheme just works. My scheme just works. It's like, no, I can find some adjustments in here I can counter. And he's, I think he's going to be running that forefront defense that we thought we were getting here, cutting edge kind of defense. I think that we have gotten that, and he's a really good, seemingly head coach too.
Yeah, and I think that's why we just haven't brought him up, because I think we agree he's the guy long term, and we're confident that he's just gonna, get this team going in the right direction with him and John. I think that's why it's just gonna be such an interesting offseason to see, just go through it and see what these guys get up to here. So yeah. Guys, awesome show. Flew by. Appreciate everybody in the comment section. It was flooding in. Appreciate the super chats. Guys, go down, sub to the channel. And also, I'm sure most of you guys that are sub to us are over at Brandon's channel. But if you haven't, get over there and subscribe to Brandon's channel as well. So that's it for us tonight, guys. Go Hawks.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's got to be on my side on the next one. So
yes, we will.
Absolutely, sure. Anytime. We appreciate it. Actually, no, you know what? Before we get out of here, I don't know why I did this.
Yeah,
Brandon, tell us what you got going over on your channel and what you got coming up on your show.
Oh, well, I'll be on tonight. We'll be talking a bit of the Grubb action this evening. Over on the NFC West Roundtable on Tuesdays, and we do a weekly roundup on the channel, B&B show Thursday. So still a lot coming down this week. I'm going to probably stream some of the playoffs games this playoffs too as well.
Awesome stuff. So yeah, let's get on there and tune in tonight after this one here. So okay, now we can get out of here. So
get out of here.
All right. Get out of here. All right. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.